Of all the games in the Far Cry series, Far Cry 2 really isn't talked about that much. It does have its own hardcore community, but usually the game you'll always hear the most people talk about is Far Cry 3. And don't get me wrong, for good reason, Far Cry 3 is a phenomenal game, but Far Cry 2 is so underappreciated. It was really ahead of its time, and it's also a far different experience from the rest of the series. It's even way different from the original game back in 2004, and this was the first game in the Far Cry series to actually be developed by a Ubisoft studio. The original Far Cry was made by Crytek and was way more of a sci-fi shooter, while Far Cry 2 leans heavily into a more grounded and realistic experience. This game was directed by Clint Hocking, who's known for heading up Ubisoft's most ambitious and unique titles, who's currently working on one of the future Assassin's Creed games codenamed Hexy. And true to his work, Hocking and his team delivered the most unique game of the Far Cry series, and I highly doubt we'll get anything like that again. Considering this was made during a time when Ubisoft was still willing to be bold and creative with their games. When they didn't hold your hand as you walked across the street. No, they let you get hit by that bus as many times as it takes until you were Okay, what is this analogy? I'm sorry. But I think it's safe to say Ubisoft plays it a lot safer these days, especially in the Far Cry series, where the formula really hasn't changed much at all since Far Cry 3. But as the series has gotten more popular over the years, it feels like Far Cry 2 has been a little forgotten, except for the OGs who defend and praise the game to this day. In fact, they were a big reason I decided to play the game almost 2 years ago now. I really enjoyed it, and in my Far Cry ranking video, I put the game in my top 3. But what exactly makes this game so different, you might ask? Well, probably my favorite thing about Far Cry 2 is its intense focus on realism, and making the game feel as gritty and grounded as possible. It's something that's definitely missing from the new Far Cry games, where you can glide around with all these crazy weapons and do all sorts of wacky stuff, like having your pet crocodile or rooster rip enemies apart or shoot CDs out of a Macarena gun. Far Cry 2 has none of that. You get your guns, explosives, a machete, some vehicles, and special weapons like rocket launchers. Your weapons actually degrade over time the more you use them and start to jam. In stealth, enemies aren't just blind or completely oblivious to everything past a certain distance. You have to take the stealth in Far Cry 2 very slowly and cautiously, because the enemy AI can actually hear and see you very easily, just like it would be in real life. You can't just run into an outpost and headshot everyone with a silenced weapon like in Far Cry 6. Ammo in general feels a lot more scarce. You have to preserve ammo or pick up different weapons quite often. The general time to kill is fast for both yourself and enemies. You have an actual physical map in the game instead of one of those large ones in a menu with a million different icons scattered across it. The HUD in general is quite limited. No mini maps or compasses, no on-screen icons telling you where an outpost or side quest is. You actually need to use your eyes and look for things yourself. The game isn't just going to tell you everything. If your vehicle gets shot just a couple times, you have to get out and repair it. The brutal healing animations the series is known for started in this game, as you have to dig bullets or debris out of your own body to stabilize wounds. Even the fire physics are extremely realistic. I heard they spent a long time just trying to get the way fire spreads correctly, and they nailed it. Just goes to show how much time, effort, and detail was poured into this game. I love how hardcore and challenging the game is as well. Again, unlike most Ubisoft games today, this game rarely holds your hand. It kind of throws you right into the fire, and it can be brutal. Right from the start, your character is infected with malaria, which essentially slowly kills you throughout the game, and it'll constantly affect you if you don't treat it. It'll stop you dead in your tracks, cause you to pass out or even die, and you need to do some missions every time you need to restock on pills. No other Far Cry game does anything like this. On top of that, the game itself is challenging. Enemies can kill you very quickly, even on normal difficulty. There's no auto-saving, and whenever you clear out an outpost or area, enemies will return to that area. It's not like the newer games where you just clear an area and that's it. It's yours. Far Cry 2's open world is always swarming with enemies who will shoot on sight and even get in vehicles and chase you down. It's an extremely brutal and hardcore world, which fits perfectly for the tone and theme of the game and story. You're a one-man army in a war-torn nation. Well, you and your buddies. They can provide you with alternate choices for your missions, and they can even heal and save your life sometimes. As for the story for Far Cry 2, it's also quite unique. It's definitely not my favorite story in the series. Some of the voice acting may leave a lot to be desired.
I've got a few errands for you, errand boy. Get on out here. Get yourself kitted up. There's ammo and meds for you.
I think Far Cry 3 has it beat when it comes to story, but the Jackal is a really interesting antagonist and a standout in the story for sure. I love how mysterious and ominous he is. You can't ever really tell what his agenda is, and he really blurs the moral line for a villain. I don't want to say too much just in case you haven't played the game yet and plan to, but while the story's not the best, it's certainly interesting enough to keep you engaged, and the Jackal is a very intriguing character. The main character is mute, and you have about a dozen choices for who you want your main character to be, but there's no difference with any of them aside from their appearance. I've said this many times before, I'm not a fan of the mute protagonists in Far Cry. I think for this series specifically, it's better to have a voiced main character, since the games are heavily narrative based. I think the mute protagonist works a lot better for big open world RPGs like Elder Scrolls or Fallout. I don't love it for Far Cry though. Far Cry 2 really is a one-of-a-kind game. Not only will you not play another Far Cry game like it, but it's also a very unique and underrated game for Ubisoft as a whole. It's a bummer because it doesn't get a lot of love these days. If you haven't tried Far Cry 2 yet, I highly recommend it, especially if you're a fan of the Far Cry series. I remember one of my biggest issues with the game when I first played it is I was getting these really weird bugs, because you see, at the time, I didn't realize the game needs to be capped at 60 FPS, otherwise it'll break. Nice one, past MasterAssassin. Freaking loser. But yeah, definitely try Far Cry 2 if you haven't yet. You're in for quite a pleasant surprise. And for a 14-year-old game, the visuals hold up pretty well. But if you've played Far Cry 2, let me know what you think about it down in the comments, and where would you rank it among the rest of the Far Cry series. If you enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate it if you considered leaving a like and subscribing to the channel if you're new. Also, consider joining the channel membership if you'd like, to have your name on screen at the end of the video and help support me. It really means a lot to me. Thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.